The station called Harmony Prime floated in the darkness between three dying stars. And it was here that the fate of entire civilizations was decided by beings older than most planets. Ambassador Chun Wei stood at the center of a chamber so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. And he felt very small indeed. 12 platforms rose around him in a circle, each one holding a representative of the elder species, the founders and rulers of galactic civilization, creatures that had sailed between stars when humanity still lived in caves and feared the thunder. Chun had prepared for this moment his entire life, and his father had prepared before him, and his grandmother before that. 3 generations of diplomats working toward this single hour when humanity would ask to join the galactic community. He cleared his throat and began to speak. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, I come before you as the voice of Earth, a world of 8 billion souls who look up at the night sky and dream of friendship with the beings who live among those distant lights. The Valkyrie delegate shifted on its platform, its crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbows across the chamber walls. And Chun tried not to stare at the ancient creature that was said to have witnessed the birth of 1,000 suns. We know that we are young, Chun continued, keeping his voice steady despite the weight of all those alien eyes upon him. We know that our technology is simple compared to yours, and our history is brief. But we believe that we have something to offer this council, something beyond mere science or wealth. He paused, gathering his courage for the words he had rehearsed 10,000 times. We offer our curiosity, our determination, our refusal to accept that anything is impossible. For a moment, the chamber was silent, and Chun allowed himself to hope. Then the Valkyrie began to laugh. It was not a human sound, more like wind chimes caught in a hurricane, a cascading series of tones that echoed off the distant walls. And one by one, the other delegates joined in, each species adding its own voice to the chorus of mockery. The Rothani delegate slapped 4 of its 8 limbs against its platform in what Chun recognized as their version of applause at a good joke. The Menari representative, a being of living smoke contained within a magnetic field, swirled with colors that indicated intense amusement. Even the ancient Kethari, who had not spoken in 300 years, made a sound like grinding stone that might have been a chuckle. Chun stood frozen as his dreams crumbled around him. Curiosity, the Valkyrie delegate said, its voice like breaking glass. You offer us curiosity, as if we who have mapped every galaxy in the observable universe need lessons in wonder from creatures who only yesterday learned that your world was not the center of everything. Determination, another delegate added, and Chun could not tell which one through his shame. Your species cannot even determine to stop killing each other long enough to present a unified government to this council. You live for less than 100 of your years. The Valkyrie continued, and now its tone was not mocking but pitying, which was somehow worse. You cannot perceive magnetic fields or taste radiation or hear the songs that stars sing as they die. And you come before us speaking of what you have to offer. The delegate leaned forward, and Chun saw his own reflection in its crystal surface. Small and fragile and utterly outmatched what you offer. Ambassador is a species barely out of its nursery, a civilization that has not yet learned to walk without falling, a people who would be a burden to this council for the next 1,000,000 years while we wait for you to mature. Chun opened his mouth to respond, but what could he say? What argument could he make against beings who had watched galaxies form and fade? The council will now vote on the petition of Earth for associate membership, a mechanical voice announced. And Chun watched as 12 lights turned red, one after another. Unanimous rejection. The petition is denied, the voice continued. Earth may submit a new petition in 10,000 standard years. 10,000 years. And humanity would be forgotten long before then, a footnote in galactic history. The amusing little species, that thought it deserved a seat at the table of gods. Chun began to gather his documents with shaking hands. And he did not notice his daughter moving until she was already past him. May was 12 years old. Small for her age, with her mother's determined chin and her father's stubborn eyes. And she had begged for months to be allowed to witness this historic moment. She had promised to stay silent and still and invisible. She broke that promise now. "Excuse me," May said. And her voice was high and clear and carried across the vast chamber with surprising strength. "I have a question." Chun's heart stopped, and he lunged forward to grab her. But she was already walking toward the Valkyrie platform with the fearless confidence that only children possess. "Child," the Valkyrie delegate said, and its amusement had returned. "This is not a place for questions from infants." "My dad says there are no bad questions," May replied. Still walking, still looking up at the towering crystal being without any sign of fear. Only bad answers. Security beings began to move toward her. Floating spheres of blue light that served as the council's enforcers. But May was fast. And she reached the base of the Valkyrie platform before they could intercept her. "If you are so old and wise," she said, her voice ringing out across the chamber, "why is your empire shrinking?" The laughter stopped. Every being in the chamber turned to look at the small human girl standing at the foot of a crystal giant. And the silence was so complete that Chun could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. The Valkyrie delegate did not move, did not speak. And in its frozen stillness, Chun saw something he had never expected to see on an alien face. He saw shock. "Remove this child," one of the other delegates demanded. But before the security spheres could reach May, a voice like mountains grinding together filled the chamber. "Let the child speak." It was the Cathari, the eldest of all the species present. A being so ancient that it remembered when the Valkyrie themselves were young and foolish, and when it spoke. Even the security spheres stopped in their tracks. "She has invoked the old words," the Cathari continued. And something in its tone made Chun's blood run cold. "She has asked a question that cannot be ignored, and in doing so, she has triggered the challenge of worth." Chun did not know what that meant. But from the way the other delegates reacted, pulling back, exchanging glances, muttering in languages his translator could not parse, he knew it was significant. He knew it was dangerous, and he knew, with a father's terrible certainty, that his daughter had just changed everything. The Cathari had not moved from its platform, but somehow it seemed larger now, more present. As if by speaking, it had reminded the universe that it was the oldest living thing in the chamber. "The challenge of worth is an ancient right," the creature explained, its voice rumbling through the floor and walls. "It exists for species who have been denied membership, but refuse to accept that denial." Ambassador Chun pushed through the frozen security spheres and grabbed May's hand, pulling her close, his mind racing through every diplomatic protocol he had ever learned. "Searching for a way out of this. My daughter is a child," he said. And he hated how his voice shook. "She does not speak for Earth. And she certainly did not intend to invoke any ancient rites. Intent does not matter," the Cathari replied. "The words have been spoken, and the challenge has been issued. And now it must be answered." "What happens if we refuse?" Chun asked. Though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Then humanity forfeits any right to petition this council for 10,000 standard years," the Valkyrie delegate said. And there was something in its crystalline voice that might have been satisfaction. "Your species will be officially classified as unworthy, and no member of the galactic community will be permitted to offer you aid, or trade or communication. 10,000 years of isolation." Chun thought, 10,000 years of being alone in the universe. And all because his daughter had asked a question. "What is the challenge?" May asked. And Chun squeezed her hand so hard she winced. But she did not take her eyes off the Cathari. There are 3 trials, the ancient being said, each one designed to test a quality that this council values. And each one must be completed by the one who issued the challenge. You mean me, May said. And it was not a question. You cannot be serious, Chun said, stepping in front of his daughter. She is 12 years old. She is a child. You cannot expect her to compete in trials designed for species that have earned their place among the stars. The Valkyrie interrupted. Yes, Ambassador, we can, and we do. And there is nothing in the ancient laws that makes exception for age or size or any other quality that your daughter lacks. The other delegates were watching now with a new kind of interest. The mockery replaced by something colder and more calculating. And Chun understood that they saw an opportunity here. If May failed, and she would fail, how could she not? Then humanity would be dismissed forever, not merely as unworthy, but as foolish. A species that had thrown away its future on the stubbornness of a child. I will do it, May said. No, Chun said, turning to face her, dropping to his knees so that their eyes were level. May, you do not understand what you are agreeing to. I understand that I made a mistake, May said. And her voice was steady, even though her hands were trembling. And I understand that if I do not fix it, our whole species will suffer. And I understand that you cannot take my place because the rules say it has to be me. She was right, and Chun knew it. And the knowledge burned in his chest like a dying star. The first trial will begin in 1 standard hour, the Cathari announced. The challenger will be taken to the Chamber of Silence, where she will face the test of patience. Guards appeared. Not the floating spheres, but actual beings in armor that gleamed like liquid metal. And they gestured for May to follow them. What is the test of patience? Chun demanded. But no one answered him. May hugged him, quickly, fiercely. And then she pulled away and walked toward the guards with her head held high. And Chun had never been more proud or more terrified in his entire life. The Chamber of Silence was not silent at all. At first, it was filled with sounds that May did not recognize. Chirps and hums and frequencies that made her teeth ache. And the walls shifted through colors that had no names in any human language. Then the door closed behind her. And everything stopped. The colors vanished, replaced by a darkness so complete that May could not see her own hand in front of her face. The sounds disappeared, swallowed by a void that seemed to press against her ears. Even the floor beneath her feet seemed to fade, until she was not sure if she was standing or floating or falling through an endless nothing. The test of patience requires the challenger to remain in sensory deprivation for 1 standard cycle, a voice said. And it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Any movement, any sound, any attempt to create stimulation will be considered a failure. 1 standard cycle. May thought, and she tried to remember how long that was in Earth time, 72 hours. Her father had told her once during one of his lessons about galactic measurements. 3 days. 3 days alone in the dark with nothing to see or hear or touch. The Valkyrie meditated for centuries. She knew they could wait for stars to die without feeling the passage of time. And this test had been designed for beings like them. Creatures of infinite patience and crystalline calm. May was not calm, and she had never been patient. And she was very much afraid, but she was also her father's daughter and her grandmother's granddaughter. And her family did not quit. So she stood in the darkness and did the only thing she knew how to do. She told herself a story. It started small. Just a simple tale about a girl who found a magic door in her closet. But as the hours passed and the silence pressed against her, the story grew. The girl became a queen, and the closet became a gateway to 1,000 worlds. And May built castles and armies and entire civilizations in her mind, populating them with friends and enemies and mysterious strangers who spoke in riddles. She lost track of time, because time did not exist in the stories she was telling herself. She forgot her fear. Because the girl in the story was brave, and May was the girl in the story. And the girl in the story was May. She traveled through jungles made of crystal and oceans that sang. She fought dragons and befriended them. She fell in love and had her heart broken and fell in love again. She grew old and died and was reborn as someone new over and over. Life after life after life, when the lights came back on, May blinked at the sudden brightness and realized she was hungry. The test of patience is complete, the voice announced. And there was something in its tone that May did not recognize. The challenger has remained in sensory deprivation for one standard cycle without failure. The door opened, and May saw her father standing on the other side, his face pale and his eyes red from crying. And behind him she saw several of the council delegates staring at her with expressions she could not read. What happened? The Valkyrie delegate demanded, pushing past Chun to study May like she was a puzzle that refused to be solved. How did you survive the void without going mad? May shrugged. I told myself stories, she said. Can I have something to eat now? I am really hungry. The Valkyrie delegate turned to look at the Cathari, and something passed between them. Some communication that May could not understand. The second trial will begin tomorrow, the Cathari announced. And May thought she heard something new in its ancient voice. She thought she heard doubt. The Rothani delegate had designed the second trial, and it was proud of its work. The species had 8 limbs and 3 hearts and could regrow any part of its body that was damaged. And it had created a gauntlet that would test every physical advantage it possessed. The arena stretched for miles through the belly of Harmony Prime, a shifting landscape of platforms and obstacles that reconfigured themselves constantly. Designed to destroy anyone foolish enough to enter, the test of endurance requires the challenger to cross the gauntlet from beginning to end. The mechanical voice announced as May stood at the starting line. There is no time limit, but the gauntlet will adapt to exploit any weakness it detects. May looked out at the course and felt her stomach drop. The first section was a maze of floating platforms, separated by gaps that sparked with electricity. And beyond that, she could see walls of flame and fields of razor-sharp crystals, and sections where gravity seemed to twist in impossible directions. You do not have to do this, her father said from behind the barrier, his voice desperate. We can find another way. We can appeal to the council. We can. There is no other way, May said, and she meant it. And she stepped onto the first platform before she could lose her courage. The gauntlet learned quickly by the time May reached the third section. It had already figured out that she was slow, much slower than the Rothani who had run this course in 42 hours. And it began to speed up the obstacles to match her pace. Platforms crumbled beneath her feet moments after she landed on them. Walls closed in from both sides, forcing her to run faster than her legs wanted to carry her. The air grew thin and hot, making each breath feel like swallowing fire. But May kept moving, kept pushing, kept refusing to stop. She made it through the electricity maze with burns on her hands and arms. She crossed the flame field by wrapping herself in a sheet of heat-resistant material she found, discarded by some previous challenger. She navigated the crystal forest by moving slowly and carefully, accepting 1,000 tiny cuts rather than one fatal slash. And then she reached the gravity inversion zone. And everything went wrong. One moment she was running across a metal bridge. The next moment she was falling upward, her body slamming into a ceiling that had become a floor. And she heard something in her arm snap with a sound like a breaking branch. Pain exploded through her body, white and blinding and all-consuming. And for a moment, May could not think, could not breathe, could not do anything but scream in the observation chamber high above the arena. The council delegates watched on their screens. There, the Rothani delegate said with satisfaction. You see, she is broken, Any moment now her body will trigger the survival response and she will enter hibernation. And the test will be failed. The Cathari said nothing, but it leaned forward, watching on the arena floor. May lay on her back with her left arm bent at an angle that arms were not supposed to bend. And she stared up at the distant ceiling and tried to remember how to think through the pain she could stop. The thought was tempting. So tempting, because stopping meant the pain would end. Stopping meant she could rest. Stopping meant she did not have to fight anymore, but stopping meant that humanity would be alone. For 10,000 years, stopping meant that her father would have to go home and tell everyone that they had failed. Stopping meant that the council was right about humans, that they were weak and fragile and unworthy. May gritted her teeth and sat up. The pain was still there, still screaming through her nervous system like an alarm that would not stop. But May had read once that pain was just information, just her body telling her that something was wrong. And she already knew something was wrong. So the information was not useful anymore. She took off her jacket with her good hand, moving slowly, carefully, biting her lips so hard she tasted blood. Then she wrapped the jacket around her broken arm, pulling it tight, turning it into a makeshift sling that held the damaged limb against her chest. And then she stood up and kept walking in the observation chamber. The Rothani delegate made a sound that its translator could not process. "That is not possible," it said. "Her arm is broken. The pain should have triggered automatic shutdown. Why is she still moving?" "Because she is human," the Cathari said. And there was something in its voice that sounded almost like respect. The gauntlet tried to stop her. It threw obstacles at her that required two hands. And May found ways around them using her teeth and her knees and her forehead. It increased the gravity until she was carrying 3 times her own weight. And May dropped to her hands and knees and crawled. It filled the air with gas that burned her lungs. And May tore strips from her clothing to make a mask and breathed through the fabric. Hour after hour, section after section, she kept going. The council delegates stopped talking. They stopped laughing. They just watched 9 hours after she entered the gauntlet. May stumbled across the finish line and collapsed. Her arm was still broken. Her body was covered in burns and cuts and bruises. Her lungs ached and her legs trembled, and she was fairly certain she had never been so tired in her entire life. But she had finished. The test of endurance is complete, the mechanical voice announced. And even it seemed surprised. The challenger has crossed the gauntlet in 9 hours, setting a new record for completion time. Medical drones swarmed around her, spraying her wounds with healing foam and fitting her arm with a proper cast. And through the haze of exhaustion, May saw her father running toward her with tears streaming down his face. "How?" the Rothani delegate demanded, appearing beside her with all 8 of its limbs trembling. "How did you do that? How did you keep moving with a broken limb?" "Our species enters hibernation automatically when we are damaged to prevent further harm." May looked up at the alien creature with eyes that were barely staying open. "It hurt," she said simply. But I was not done yet. The Rothani stared at her for a long moment, and then it looked at the other delegates. And May saw something pass between them that she was too tired to interpret. "The 3rd trial will begin when the challenger has recovered," the Cathari announced. And this time, there was no doubt in its voice. This time, there was something else. Something that May would not recognize until much later. This time there was fear, because the Cathari was old. Older than stars, and it had seen many species rise and fall. And it knew that the most dangerous creatures in the universe were not the ones with the sharpest claws or the strongest limbs. The most dangerous creatures were the ones that refused to stay down, and this small human girl, with her broken arm and her stubborn eyes, had just proven that her species was exactly that kind of dangerous. The Cathari had designed the final trial itself, And this was significant in 4 million years of galactic history. No species had ever defeated a Cathari in a test of the mind, because the Cathari had been thinking about the universe since before most stars had learned how to shine. The chamber where the trial would take place was different from the others. A small circular room with walls that seemed to be made of pure light. And at its center floated a holographic display that hurt May's eyes to look at directly. The test of comprehension requires the challenger to solve the equation of entropy, the Cathari announced. And its voice filled the chamber like thunder rolling through mountains. This equation models the complete thermodynamic destiny of the universe. Every star that will burn out, every galaxy that will fade, every particle that will eventually stop moving. May stared at the hologram and saw numbers and symbols that her mind could not process. Relationships and variables that seemed to shift and change, even as she looked at them. The Cathari have been working on this equation since the universe was young. Her father had told her the night before, his face pale with worry. They say it would take a human 10,000 years just to understand the question, let alone find the answer. But the rules were clear, and the trial had to be attempted, and May had come too far to give up now. She walked to the center of the room and looked up at the floating mathematics that represented everything. That would never end. I do not understand most of this, she said honestly. And somewhere behind her, she heard the Velthari delegate make a sound of triumph. That is expected, the Cathari said, and there was no mockery in its voice. Only patience. You may take as long as you need. Though the trial will end automatically if you admit defeat. May nodded and began to study the equation. She could not read most of the symbols, but she could see patterns in them. Relationships between certain variables that reminded her of things she had learned in school. Here was a section that seemed to describe heat flowing from hot things to cold things. Like the way her mother's coffee always got cold if she left it on the table too long. There was a part that looked like it was about disorder increasing over time. Like the way her room always got messy no matter how often she cleaned it, and everywhere, in every section of the equation, there was the assumption that things only went one way: hot to cold, order to disorder, life to death. Everything running down. Everything fading. Everything ending. May frowned. Something is wrong, she said. The Cathari shifted on its platform. And for the first time since the trials began, it seemed genuinely interested. Explain. It said. May pointed to a variable near the center of the hologram. A symbol that appeared again and again throughout the equation. This thing here, she said. It assumes that entropy only goes in one direction, that everything always gets more disordered. But that is not right. The second law of thermodynamics is one of the most fundamental principles of reality, the Cathari replied. Entropy increases, always. This is not an assumption, but a fact of the universe. But it does not increase everywhere at the same time, May said. And she was thinking now, really thinking, in a way she had not done since the trials began. My grandmother has a garden. The delegates exchanged glances, confused by the sudden change in topic. In her garden she takes dead things, May continued. Leaves and food scraps and things that are rotting. Things that are disordered and falling apart. And she puts them in a pile, and she adds water and worms and thyme. And at the end she has soil, rich, dark soil that can grow tomatoes. She looked up at the ancient Cathari with eyes that were suddenly bright. The tomatoes are more ordered than the dead leaves, she said. They have structure and cells and seeds and life, and they came from disorder. So where did the entropy go? The chamber was silent. It went somewhere else. May answered her own question. The sun poured energy into the garden, and the worms ate things and pooped things out, and heat went into the air. And entropy increased somewhere else so that it could decrease in the tomatoes. She pointed at the equation again. Your math treats the universe like a closed box where everything is winding down together. But it is not a closed box. It is full of things that move entropy around. Stars and planets and living things that take disorder from one place and push it into another. The Cathari had not moved, had not spoken, and May could not read its alien face. "Life is not a mistake in your equation," she said. And now she was excited, the words tumbling out faster than she could organize them. Life is not just entropy increasing in a complicated way. Life is the universe figuring out how to move entropy around. How to build order here by creating disorder there. How to fight back against the running down. She paused, suddenly embarrassed by her own outburst. "I cannot solve your equation," she admitted. "I do not know enough math. I do not understand most of what I am looking at. But I think there is something missing from it. Something about how life and complexity and organization fit into the picture." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then the Cathari made a sound that May's translator could not process. A deep rumbling that seemed to shake the very walls of the chamber. "For 3 million years, the ancient being said, the Cathari have debated whether life is merely a temporary eddy in the river of entropy or something more fundamental. And in 3 million years, no one has articulated the question as clearly as this child just did." It turned to face the other delegates. And something in its posture had changed. "She has not solved the equation," the Cathari continued. "But she has identified a flaw in it that we ourselves have struggled to express. She has looked at the mathematics of universal death and asked why it does not account for the mathematics of life." The Valtteri delegate rose from its platform, its crystal body flashing with angry colors. "This proves nothing," it said. She admitted herself that she cannot solve the problem. The trial is designed to test comprehension, and she has demonstrated that she cannot comprehend. The trial is designed to test how a species thinks, the Cathari replied, and there was something like warmth in its terrible voice. "And this child has shown us something remarkable." It looked at May, and she felt the weight of 4 million years of wisdom pressing down on her. "She has shown us that humans do not solve problems the way we do," the Cathari said. "They do not work within the boundaries of the question. They do not accept the assumptions they are given. They look at an equation that defines the death of everything, and they ask why it does not include the part about the tomatoes." The ancient being rose to its full height, and for the first time, May realized just how large it truly was. "The test of comprehension is complete," it announced. "And while the challenger has not provided a solution, she has done something that perhaps matters more." It paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was quieter, almost wondering. "She has asked a question that even we cannot answer." May stood in the center of the chamber with the equation of universal death floating above her head. And she did not know if she had passed or failed, but she knew, somehow, that she had done something that mattered, and tomorrow, the council would vote. The council chamber felt different now when May walked in with her father by her side, her arm still in its healing cast. She noticed that the delegates were not laughing anymore. They were watching her with something that looked almost like caution, as if she were a creature they had not seen before and did not know how to classify. "The trials are complete," the mechanical voice announced. "The council will now deliberate on the results of the challenge of worth." May took her place at the center of the chamber, standing in the same spot where her father had stood just days ago, when everything had seemed hopeless. When the future of humanity had been nothing but a joke to the ancient powers of the galaxy. The Valtteri delegate spoke first. The challenger survived the test of patience, but she did so through imagination rather than true meditative discipline. It leaned forward, its crystal body catching the light. She completed the test of endurance, but only through reckless disregard for her own physical damage. A trait that speaks of madness rather than strength. The delegate's voice grew harder, and in the test of comprehension, she admitted that she could not solve the equation. that she could not even understand most of what she was looking at. It rose to its full height, towering over May like a mountain of living glass, by any reasonable measure. This child has failed to demonstrate that humanity possesses the qualities this council values, and I move that we dismiss the challenge of worth as inconclusive and maintain our original rejection. Several other delegates made sounds of agreement, and May felt her heart sink, but then the Cathari stirred, and every other sound in the chamber stopped. The ancient being had not spoken during a council deliberation in over 300 years, and the weight of its attention was like standing in the path of an oncoming star. We designed the trials to measure what we value, the Cathari said, its voice rolling through the chamber like distant thunder. Patience, endurance, comprehension. The qualities that have allowed our species to survive for millions of years. It paused, and May had the strange sensation that it was looking directly at her, seeing something that the other delegates had missed. This child showed us something else, the Cathari continued. In the void, she did not find peace through emptiness as our species would. She filled the emptiness with stories. She created entire universes in her mind rather than simply endure the silence. The ancient being shifted, and the chambers seemed to tremble in the gauntlet. She did not survive through superior biology or regeneration. She broke, and then she kept going. She wrapped her shattered arm in cloth and crawled through obstacles that should have killed her, not because she did not feel the pain, but because she refused to let the pain decide when she was finished. May remembered the agony of those hours, the way her body had screamed at her to stop, the way she had kept moving anyway, and in the final trial, she looked at an equation that represents the inevitable death of everything that exists, and she asked why it did not account for a garden. The Cathari made a sound that May's translator rendered as something between a laugh and a sigh. We have been working on that equation for 3 million years, it said. We have refined it and debated it and contemplated it, and in all that time, none of us thought to ask the question that this child asked in 5 minutes. It turned to address the other delegates directly. We are old, the Cathari said. We have seen empires rise and crumble to dust. We have watched stars be born and die. We have accumulated wisdom beyond the comprehension of younger species. And we have never, in all our millions of years, seen a species that breaks when it should, by every reasonable measure, shatter, and then refuses to be broken. The chamber was absolutely silent. Humans do not have our patience, the Cathari continued. They do not have the Rathani's bodies or the Velthari's longevity, or any of the qualities that we have decided make a species worthy of joining our council. It paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was softer, almost wondering, but they have something we do not have, something we may have lost long ago if we ever had it at all. The ancient being looked at May, and she felt the weight of 4 million years of existence pressing down on her. They have the stubborn, foolish, magnificent belief that the universe can be argued with, the Cathari said. That pain is just information. That death is just a problem to be solved. That even the fundamental laws of thermodynamics might be missing something important about tomatoes. It rose to its full height, and its voice rang out across the chamber like the tolling of an ancient bell. I cast my vote in favor of humanity's admission to the Galactic Council. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. The Cathari had not voted in favor of any species in over 1 million years. The mechanical voice announced the tally, and one by one, the lights on the delegates' platforms turned red. 11 votes against humanity. 11 species who still saw humans as children playing at adulthood, but the Cathari's light glowed green. And the mechanical voice continued. The Cathari vote carries founder's weight, it announced. Override protocols engaged, the petition is approved. Humanity is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. For a moment, May did not understand what she was hearing. Then her father grabbed her and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around, laughing and crying at the same time. And the reality of what had happened finally sank in. They had won, humanity had won. The other delegates were talking over each other, some protesting, others simply staring in disbelief. But May did not care about any of them. She was looking at the Velturi delegate, who had descended from its platform and was now approaching her with slow, careful steps. "Little human," the crystalline being said, and its voice was different now. Smaller somehow, less certain. "Yes," May said. And she was not afraid. The Velturi knelt down until its gleaming face was level with hers. And May saw herself reflected in its surface, small and tired and bruised, but standing upright. "You asked me why my empire is shrinking," the Velturi said. "And I will tell you the answer, because you have earned it." It paused, and May thought she saw something like sadness flickering through its crystal depths. "We became perfect," the Velturi said. "We achieved everything we set out to achieve. We answered every question we thought to ask. And when there was nothing left to strive for, we began to fade." The ancient being looked at her with eyes that had seen the birth of galaxies. "I think I am afraid of your species." "Small one," it said. May considered this. "That is okay," she said. "My dad says fear is just respect that has not been introduced yet." The Velturi made a sound that might have been a laugh, and then it rose and walked away. And May turned back to her father, behind her, unseen by anyone. The Cathari was making a note in a file that would not be opened for 1,000 years. Its translator would have rendered the note something like this: "Recommend elevated monitoring. This species will either save the galaxy or burn it down. Possibly both, simultaneously, and somewhere far below." In the depths of Harmony Prime, a communication was being sent to Earth, a message that would change everything. A message that began with 4 simple words: "Welcome to the stars. The end."